In Tales of the Valiant, in the Monster Vault in particular, they have a feature for monsters called Doom Points. And I think Doom Points are an interesting idea. And I'm wondering whether or not they can be expanded. Doom Points, very, very simple, like just a few paragraphs in this book, and it's considered an optional rule. At the start of each combat encounter, a GM gains a special resource called Doom based on the CR of the encounter. I assume that's the total CR, like you add all the monsters together, and that's how many Doom Points you get. It wasn't exactly clear what the CR of an encounter meant. As detailed in the Doom by Encounter tier table, the DM can use Doom to influence the results of creature die rolls, turning the tide on the PCs or helping a creature last just one more turn longer. The GM can spend Doom in the following ways. Give a creature advantage on an attack roll. Give a PC disadvantage on a save. Once per encounter, refresh, recharge, or otherwise gain one additional use of a limited use feature such as a Dragon's Breath weapon, a legendary creature's legendary resistance, or a spell in the mage's spellcasting. Doom is optional and exists to give creatures some extra staying power against particularly powerful, crafty, or resourceful PCs. Keep in mind, Doom doesn't have to be used in every combat encounter. As a GM, consider using Doom in an encounter if the combat encounter is likely the only combat encounter the PCs will face all day and the PCs are well rested. You have multiple experienced players. You have more than 4 players. Your players' characters have extra magic items, resources, optimized statistics, or similar aspects that make them tougher than the average PCs. If the encounter is particularly significant to the story, such as a fight against a leader of an antagonistic organization working against the PCs, the final fight of a major story arc, or a climactic fight against a powerful antagonist. And the amount of Doom you get is like CR 1 to 4 is 1, 5 to 8 is 2, 9 to 12 is 3, 13 to 16 is 4, 17 to 20 is 5, and 21 plus is 6. I think this is an interesting idea. And when one of the reasons I think about it, and I think that we could actually take this idea and port this over to whatever version of 5e that we're running, is let's be blunt. I can't trust any version of 5e to help me as a GM maintain the story of a boss monster. I talk about this, Scott Gray and Teos Abadia and myself talk about this pretty at length in Forge of Foes. In my opinion, boss monsters are at a distinct disadvantage just for being a boss monster. The minute you make one monster stand up above the rest, the characters will focus every ounce of their wrath on that monster. They'll pour everything on them. They'll take every save or suck spell. They'll run everything they can do to make sure that guy does not ever get to act or dies right away. And what's funny is this is really a good example of that concept that's been going around from the days of Civilization. I don't know if it was Civilization that did it, that players will optimize their way out of the fun. And I think that that is a powerful thing to consider, because if players manage to get their characters to destroy every boss in a campaign without that boss ever acting, they wouldn't probably like that very much. And yet that's what they want to do, right? That's their initial drive is, I want to charm that boss. Like, it's really fun to charm a boss monster once, and now the boss is on your side fighting against all of his own guys. That's really wild. It's really fun to throw a force cage. One of my favorite boss encounters was when the characters threw a force cage on that boss, and the boss managed to negotiate his way into sticking his tentacles into their eyes and ears, even though willingly, right? That the offer he made was so good, characters gave up their mental capacity to this mind flayer, like it was actually an aboleth. I have circumstances where those sort of opportunities for a character to really get an edge on a boss was an interesting part of the fight, but not all of them. And many times bosses are just going to get destroyed. And the story, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, why do I get upset by this? Like, why not just let them destroy the boss? And I think it's because the mechanics are getting in the way of the story. That characters have abilities whose mechanical effect breaks away from the story about this boss. There should be just some bosses that you can't just immediately blind and they never get a single attack, or that you can't just throw in a force cage and they're stuck for the entire battle and they can't do anything. It actually is, the story of the boss is better than that, right? If you're fighting Lord Soth and you throw a force cage on him and you go up with a glaive and poke him through the bars with a glaive until he's dead, that would suck. I don't think you can really do that I think you could do that with a force cage, because he can't teleport, so he's stuck in there forever. He never got a saving throw because force cage doesn't allow a save. That feels like it would suck. Now, what feels true to the story of that boss is you throw a force cage around Lord Soth and he grimaces and says something dark, and then he grabs the force cage and he rips it open. And then the players are like, you can't rip open a force cage. It's like, he can. And that's what I'm wondering if doom points are good for. What if we expand them beyond these three things, getting advantage on an attack roll, forcing disadvantage on a save, or recharging effects or recharging other abilities? What if they were a sort of get out of jail free card for a boss? What if we could kind of improvise a bunch of different ways that these things could be used? For example, what if they could penetrate resistances? What if they could say, yeah, you've got your crazy, like, if I take half damage, if I get hit by an area effect, I only take half the damage, and if I make a save, I make none. And you say, actually, no, he pierces through that ability, right? Or, ripping through a force gauge is another example. Breaking past, penetrating Hero's Feast. The ancient green dragon's breath is so powerful that with this next one, he forces such energy that it blows past your Hero's Feast and you take half the damage instead of no damage, right? That it can pierce through stuff. What if doom points could do this? Now, a lot of people are going to be like, that's terrible, Mike. What you're talking about is terrible. That's cheating. You're forcing the story of the game. You're breaking past all the stuff in there. And that's why we'd have to be really careful with it. And we could be careful in a couple ways. One is there's a limit on them, right? You only have so many doom points. I don't know if I would do this. I might say like just for ease, that a boss has 3 doom points. So I don't have to worry about the CR. I would certainly tell the players about them before they even face a boss who's going to use them. An example would be I could tell my characters, I did this on Wednesday, and at first I got a lot of resistance. And then when I told them what if it was limited, they were like, oh, actually, that's not so bad. And if I said, look, there are certain creatures in the City of Arches who are blessed by the Nameless King. These blessed creatures get advantages that other monsters don't. They typically cannot be charmed, knocked prone, put asleep, stunned, they pinned down, stuck in a force cage, all of the things that you might normally do to control a creature. These guys are not going to be controlled because they are blessed by the Nameless King. And then if I said, and each of them has 3 blessings that they can use, where they can call upon their energy tied to the Nameless King for aid in this, and it's typically going to break through crowd control-y sort of stuff. It might also be used to burst through things like resistance and whatnot. That would be a potential option. Yeah, somebody brings up counterspell. Guess what? When you have a creature that's blessed by the Nameless King and you try to counterspell them, they can use one of their abilities to break through your counterspell. Their spell is going to have an effect. And the intention with these things is to give an element of the story back to the boss so that they actually act like the boss would be expected to act like in a story. Because we're using mechanics that break past the story when we try to pin them down. If Indiana Jones had no trouble with any enemy he ever fought, we all love the scene where he pulls out the gun and shoots the swordsman. That was really funny. Guess what? Temple of Doom, he faces off 2 guys. He reaches for a gun. He doesn't have it, right? And the reason why is if you do it all the time, now it's boring. You do it more than once and it's boring. So what are the things that you can do to offset that? And I'm wondering if doom points are a way to do that. I wonder if doom points are an option that we can give to very particular boss. Not every monster gets it, not every fight, not even every boss fight. But in boss fights where you recognize that certain bosses are going to need advantages like this, can we give them a resource that they can spend to do things you normally can't do? Like, I'm going to breathe out and all of your saves are a disadvantage because I'm using one of these coins, right? That would be a way. I actually want to use coins for it. I think I've got 3 little campaign coins and I want to set them out, and those are the coins, and he would use these, and bang, he would have these options to inflict things that you normally couldn't do. So I'm working on this. This is a concept. This is not yet fully tested, fully run, fully endorsed. It absolutely works. I haven't really tried this yet, but I want to try it, and I'm thinking I'm gonna try it. One nice thing about this idea is we don't have to try it everywhere. It doesn't have to be the new thing. We can just try it for one fight and see how it does. And maybe we don't even need it, right? Maybe it turns out that the boss did fine without him. But maybe we can try him. The one thing I would do, though, is I would make sure it's clear to your players what you're doing so that it doesn't look like you're just cheating on your side. And you're like, yeah, you have rules. I don't have any rules. Like, no, I have rules. They are these 3 things. But these 3 things are used for these particular purposes. And that you explain it to them. And you're like, I'm not going to stop you from doing damage to the monster. I'm not going to stop you from being able to defend the monster. But I'm using them when the story of the monster is not meeting up with its actual play at the table. And that's what these things are for. They are to give an advantage to a creature that needs it because of the role that they have in the story that we're telling. So that's my thought about Doom points. I like the idea here. I'm not sure they actually go far enough. The idea that they can restore legendary action is good, but I don't think they can do other things that we might want them to do. I want to play with this idea, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. So go ahead and feel free to leave me a comment. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is the best way to keep track of all of the different things that I'm doing. It's got links to all of my videos and podcasts and other articles that I write. You get a weekly RPG-related article sent to your inbox and a free PDF adventure builder just for signing up. PDFs again. You can also pick up any of my books at the Sly Flourish bookstore, or you can join the Patreon. Patrons get access to the Patreon Q&A. They get access to the awesome Lazy DM community over on Discord. They get a ton of different tools to help you run your game. And they help me put on shows like this. Patrons, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Get out there and play an RPG.